Today, I want to talk about something that I saw in the last week, which was essentially a poll that came out that was tracking voter registration over the last 4 years. And I think when you take a look at it, it comes no surprise that Trump is back in the office because of this trend. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at the video and then give some of my thoughts as to why that trend might be occurring, as well as how big of a shift it actually has been. Because it came out this week where it actually was tracking that voter registration, the changes in it, state by state, and it is kind of mind-boggling just how big of a shift it actually has been.
The Democratic Party faces a voter registration crisis. That's the new headline from the New York Times, with plenty of data to back it up. The Times reports that of the 30 states that track voter registration by political party, Democrats lost ground to Republicans in every single one between the 2020 and 2024 elections. And often they lost it by a lot.
And we'll go back here just to look at this specific portion of it, just this claim. And that's what I was talking about, where it was between 2020 and 2024. And that's where I think, yes, you see, that's why Trump won, right? And again, so it's not all 50, right? But every single one of the 30 states said that Democrats lost ground to Republicans. So Republicans had more people registering as Republicans than Democrats. And in a lot of them, and I hope they'll show the chart. If not, I'll pull it up later. But essentially, you can see on the map of the United States, every single state, and basically what has the shift in every single state. And it's kind of insane to behold. But again, often by a lot, which is where you see every single swing state go to Donald Trump. And then also, that's why he won the popular vote as well.
In 2024 elections, and often they lost it by a lot. That 4-year swing toward Republicans adds up to 4.5 million voters, a deep political hole that could take years for Democrats to climb out of. And
that claim I'm not 100% sure of, because I think there are two factions within the coalition that switched over to Republicans this time around. I think there was the young voters, and then there was independents. And the independents, as I've explained, they're basically just swinging back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. And what happens is they go Republican this time around. Trump doesn't fulfill a bunch of promises. The Jeffrey Epstein thing gets resurfaced. Israel and Gaza is continuing to happen. Russia and Ukraine continues to happen. All of these things, affordability, I think a huge one that kind of gets downplayed, but just how affordable is life? That's not coming back down. That's not, being able to buy a house is not obtainable by any younger generation. And so when all of these things are continuing to go poorly, well, then a large portion of those 4.5 million voters are just going to swing immediately back over to Democrats. And the thing about it, though, that I do want to call out is a big portion of that is going to depend on if Democrats actually take home the correct messages. And I think there was a lot of soul searching that happened at the beginning of it, where they were, how did this happen? They feel defeated, it's awful. And as time progresses, I am not 100% certain that they are taking away the correct conclusions from that. Like Gavin Newsom now, there's stories out that he's basically trying to emulate Trump and just own the Republicans. And that's not the reason why Trump won, in my opinion. The reason Trump won is because it was just institutions and institutional politicians that just, you're getting more of the same. You're literally, it's not voting for anything different. So when people saw Trump, what they see is basically a big middle finger to that system. And that's what people want, is they want something radically different to try and, hey, if nothing's working, I'm going to do something completely outside of the norm. Granted, Trump was in office before, But that's where you saw, oh, he's different than any of the politicians that were around before. And it was better back then than how I feel under Biden for most Americans. So, yeah, that's my take on this, is that if Democrats actually take away the correct conclusions for why they lost, instead of, oh, we just need to have someone emulate Trump. No, that's not what it is. It's that the American experience is just completely awful for most of the citizens living in the United States. If they can find a way to speak to and fix that, then you could see in my opinion, a large proportion of those 4.5 million voters swing back.
This decline is happening across the board. According to the Times still, Democrats are losing ground with new voters. For the first time since 2018, more new voters nationwide chose to be Republicans than Democrats last year, adding that they're losing ground in battleground states like North Carolina, where Republicans erased roughly 95% of the registration advantage that Democrats held in the fall of 2020.
And I think a huge reason for that is because these are states where it's not crazily entrenched. And so you're more likely to see a huge swing like that in one way or the other. Because if it's a 50-50 state, right, you might have a Democrat friend and you might have a Republican friend, right, if you're in the middle or whatever. Or you're a somewhat more reasonable Republican or Democrat that if you see a candidate that looks significantly better, well, then you're going to vote for them. I think a big positive of that is that you get to hear both sides. And that's kind of what I try and do, right? I have some friends that are on the left and some are on the right. But then also I try and listen to news sources that are on the left and the right. And the goal of that is to kind of understand both sides, hear both arguments, and then come to a conclusion of my own on what I think is the best thing. And again, in states where it's more, it's less of a bubble, if you will, where it's just more groupthink, everyone thinks the exact same thing, where maybe you have 1 out of 5 of your friends that's a Democrat or a Republican, and then they're afraid to state their opinion, so they just, oh yeah, haha, okay, whatever. They're not going to speak up, and they don't feel comfortable actually voicing what their opinions are. If that is the scenario, then yeah, you're going to be much more entrenched in that, and you're more likely to see people who are swayed in that direction. So if you have a deep blue state like California or New York, and that's what you're surrounded in, that's where you get these fringe ideologies that emerge, because the entire picture isn't this, your entire picture is this. And then eventually it keeps moving further and further and further left until, well, now you believe trans in sports is okay. Well, now you believe all of the most left ideas or right ideas, right? Now you want to completely ban abortion at the time of conception. Again, these are the two extremes, and the only way that you get to those is when, in my opinion, you're just completely surrounded with the same people who are thinking the same things, and then that allows you to go further and further down that. Because I think anyone who has a complete view of both sides can say, okay, this person has some opinions that I find correct, but then this person does as well, and so I'm going to have my opinion somewhere in the middle. And to be quite frank, I think the best way to think about it is, well, I'm just going to allow them to do whatever they want, and I don't have an opinion on it, because again, I respect them. They're a good person. I want them to do what they think is best for themselves. And what does it matter to me, because it doesn't affect my life? And I think a lot more people would have that mindset if they had this, the whole picture, right? They had friends on the right, they had friends on the left, and they can understand where both sides are coming from. It humanizes those ideas. And so that, I think, is just a much more healthier mindset that I think people need to have. And yes, so of course, in the swing states, more people are going to swing because they're less heavily entrenched on one side or the other.
Democrats are also losing ground with young voters. In 2018, nearly 2/3 of new registrants under 45 who had picked one of the two major parties were Democrats. In 2024, Republicans were an outright majority.
And the thing about that is, and this is something that I love to talk about, that's because everything is so unaffordable for them. And especially as AI is coming in, and it's going to continue to be more and more and more radicalized against whatever party they see as being their oppressors. And I think the perfect example, I mean, if you just think about, right, people who are coming out who are 18 years old of school during the last 4 years, they come out, the job market is maybe not so hot, now AI is starting to come in. What is going to happen? Right or wrong, they're going to blame their hardships on the party that's in power. And the other thing, especially when you look at this for men, the issue is that's going to swing very hard in the other direction because of DEI. And the thing about DEI is you cannot look at DEI. In my opinion, DEI is racist. And that's going to upset some people watching this, but you have to think about it. Why is it racist? Because think about what the definition of racism is. My definition for racism is something that disadvantages one group of people or many groups of people, right? It's a negative way of thinking about it, and it disadvantages a group of people. And so what is DEI? It's literally just, and if you agree with it, it's literally just racism against a group of people that you don't like. And so you're okay with DEI. But it's literally disadvantaging, most of the time, white men. Saying that as a white man, I'm going to get hate for that, I'm sure, but that's truly what DEI is it's advantaging one group of people, which actually is not even advantaging the group that it's supposed to benefit. It actually helped out white women more than anyone. You'd think, oh, it's supposed to advance blacks or Mexicans or whoever, but no, it's actually advanced white women. But the thing is, it is at the cost of disadvantaging explicitly white men. So of course, any white men who are coming of age and seeing this, whether it has actually disadvantaged them or not, are 100% going to blame the Democratic Party and their policies of DEI for that. And so, again, whether it has anything to actually do with that or not, maybe they are not getting a job because it's actually just hard times. But when they see the Democratic Party and DEI and they can point to it, whether it's true, again, whether it's truthfully the cause or not, they're going to blame it. And that's the thing. And then you're going to see a hard swing back like you're seeing now, and everyone's going to go to the Republicans because the Republicans aren't pushing something that disadvantages them. I mean, it's just common sense. So if you ever want young white men, again, you're going to have to completely get rid of DEI as the Democratic Party. You cannot be in favor of it because you're never going to get white men ever. Why would anyone vote for something that disadvantages them?
The gender gap is also a growing problem for Democrats. The Times analysis shows the Republican strength among men is far outpacing the Democratic edge with women. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Joe Morelli of New York. He's the ranking.
And that's the thing about it, is that it's those two things in confluence, right? Because there's young women who are coming out who are also having a hard time, and then they're going to go Republican. There's some subset in that, in the women. It's not just going to be all women for left. But again, the total number of women who are disillusioned with the current status or previous status quo, right, between 20 and 2024, and then plus all of the men, plus, additional men who, again, it's just, the problem is that when you cater, and this is the thing that I think both parties used to have an issue with, is that when you cater to the most extreme subset of voters because you think, oh, we just want to turn them out in the highest numbers, well, now you're forcing people to choose between the most insane beliefs on your side or whatever the other side is selling. And the one thing I will say about the Republicans is I think they have done a very good job in distancing themselves away from the most extreme of their party. And that's the thing about it, is they basically said, yeah, okay, you got your, we repealed Roe versus Wade. You shut up and go away forever. We don't want to hear from you anymore. We're not catering to you anymore. We're going to get the coalition that is majority right. And then by having common sense takes, like men should not be able to compete in women's sports, well, now we're grabbing the people in the center as well. And that's how you win. But when you cater to the most extreme, I mean, think about when the Republicans were being bashed over the head the most, was the whole Roe versus Wade thing. And then now the further that we get from it, and oh, by the way, people in blue cities, it's actually not that bad for you, right? Your state is never going to ban abortions, so, has it actually affected your way of life? No. So it's not, the sky is not falling like you thought it was. But then you have the other party where it's, and I've talked to people who are staunchly on the left, and you bring up trans in sports and they can't even defend it. So when you have multiple issues like that, or when you have like drag show story hour, or where you have all these things that are so insane and so crazy and no one can argue for them, well, then that's what your party is. And you again, I've talked to people on both sides. No one can defend those things on the left, except people who have completely lost their mind. And then you show them any modicum of actual fact or statistics, and they have no response to it, because there is no response to it. And so again, the right has shoved the far right out, and this is why political theory never really made sense, is that if you are a party, you should be catering to the people in the middle, because all the people we'll use the right for example, all the people that are the most fringe are going to show up and vote for you anyway, because what's the alternative is the opposite of whatever they believe in, to the extreme. So that's an existential threat for them already. So if you're on the a politician on the right, you need to be catering to the middle, and you need to get these people. So literally every single 80-20 issue, you need to be on the 80 side, whatever it is. That's what you need to claim. Like, yes, I'm a Republican, but then I also believe pro-choice, whatever. That's what you need to do. Because again, the Republicans are going to come out and vote for you anyway, because it's an existential threat of having someone in who counters all of their beliefs. And that's why it never made sense to me that either side catered to the most fringe people in either party. It just makes absolutely no sense. But what do I know? Not a politician, not someone who's paid millions of dollars to tell them how to run their campaigns. But it just is common sense to me.
Member of the Committee on House Administration. Congressman, I want to start there with all of this new data in the Times and get your reaction to this analysis that shows your party hemorrhaging voters from several different demographics.
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me. I think it's certainly something you can't ignore. I think for some time now, people in the party have ignored the trends. I thought the article did a great job of identifying the problem, and you have to acknowledge the problem before you can begin to address it. I know that what I'm doing here back in Rochester is really trying to organize people, trying to get them to knock on doors and visit with community and talk to people and really engage in conversation about what voters have expectations around, what things they're concerned about. Sometimes, we become...
And that is the correct action. What is not the right action is talking to these people who, again, it's these think tanks where, let me tell you, someone who's so detached from the average American, has nothing in common with them. Oh, I'm going to tell you what the average American is looking for. No, go out and talk to people. That's how I always got my vibes, was trying to consume just different sources of media and watch different things and come to my own understanding and conclusion and just think about, okay, what makes the most logical sense. But then I felt like I always had the best understanding of where the U.S. zeitgeist was when I was out traveling around for my last job, where I basically was traveling like 50% of the time and all across the U.S. So I would get there and I would take an Uber and I would just talk to whoever was driving me around. And so, okay, I talked to 5, 10, whatever amount of people as I'm going, into these different cities all around the U.S. And that's how you get a better idea of where people actually are. And that was why I thought Trump was going to win the last election, because that's what it was, is I just had that feeling that no matter where I went, people were not happy with the Democratic Party. And so going out and actually talking to people and getting opinions from average people is going to pay off so much more for the Democratic Party, because they're going to understand that they need populist messaging, not catering to the donor class. And that's how you end up running a campaign like Kamala did, where she refused to distance herself from Biden. She's not going to say anything anti-war. And then the few things that she did say, like, oh, I'm going to tackle housing, well, then, nope, it gets nipped in the bud. You're not allowed to talk about that anymore. And then for the rest of the campaign, she has nothing to say about it. And then she just is campaigning on vibes and, fringe. Oh, we're going to additional DEI benefits to young black entrepreneurs. Like, get out of here. That is not a winning message whatsoever. The people want life to get better for them. And that's what candidates need to understand. And if there's a candidate that, even if you know that they're not going to execute on it, if they're selling you that message, people are going to move towards them.
Convinced that the things we care about is what everyone cares about. And sometimes that's not the case. So we really have to do a much better job in a very granular way, in a literally door-by-door way. And we're organizing here in Rochester. I've literally spent every waking moment meeting with groups in the community. People.
And that's the thing, too, is that at a certain point in time, as long as the Republicans, which I think the Republicans are 100% shooting themselves in the foot, as long as they don't do that and completely fall on their faces, then this is going to continue to happen, and it's going to become a death spiral. Because the issue is, if the Republicans capture all the people in the middle and they move over and they're not completely upset about what's going on, which I think a lot of them probably are, but as long as the Democrats are worse, they're going to stay over there. And then the other thing that the Democrats are doing is that then they're also infighting within their own party, which is going to alienate some other subset. But then also there's the people on the far left, which it could suppress their turnout, because then they don't see the Democrats doing what they want. And that's where, there's the fighting against the Republicans, we want to see the Democrats fight and put up a fight and not just get rolled over, which they completely are. And, why not? Because, if you run the House, the Senate, and you have the presidency, then there's really nothing you can do. But the voters not seeing you be combative against them that are still left in there, because you keep the smaller group that you cater to, well, then you have to continue catering to the most radicalized portion. So, yeah, that's where you're going to see that even in 2025, it's still going down, but it's going to turn into a death spiral at a certain point in time just because of that. Because, again, it's a purity test. And that's the thing with the Democratic Party, is you can never be pure enough, right? There's always one-upsmanship, especially in the actual party, right? And to a lesser extent, some of the people in the base, where it's, you have to add on, you can't just have a LGBTQIA+. You have all these things that you keep adding onto it, because it can't just be this group. It has to be, well, then what are the even more marginalized groups that are even smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until like, what are we even doing here, right? And that's where, again, when you cater to smaller and more fringe groups, that's going to continue to keep happening.
All political persuasions and stripes, to talk to them, engage with them in what they see happening. And there are real concerns about authoritarianism, but there are equally concerns about, am I going to have health care? Am I going to be able to feed my family? Are the price of goods too high? And those are the things that I think we need to address.
And that's exactly what I was saying, is that, yes, because those are things that are not talked about, but I think play a major role. Because if you can't afford to eat and you have huge credit card bills and you can't afford a $500 expense, well then, yeah, I mean, why would you continue to vote a certain way if your material life is not better? And that's the biggest thing that I think these politicians don't understand, because they make over $100,000, and then, oh, by the way, they also, a large subset of them on both sides are doing insider trading. So they have no actual connection to, okay, by the way, this is how the average American feels. Like, it is not affordable for people to buy a house. It is not affordable for people to go buy groceries even, because things ramped up price-wise during COVID and they never really came back down. And people are getting pinched and pinched and pinched. And I think you're starting to get to the end of the rope where people are now starting to fall out and experience negative consequences because they can't keep up anymore. And I think you're seeing a lot of that happening and start to rear its head. And so, yeah, if you're so disconnected that you don't understand the average person, how can you possibly try and get them to vote for you?
I think affordability is the thing that comes up in almost every single interview that I do, Republican or Democratic member that I'm talking to. And so I do think that you're seizing on something there. But when I read this Times...
And to her point, it's both sides that are talking about it already. So you don't exactly have an advantage over the Republicans. And as long as you still have the incredibly unpopular opinions that you're still running on, well then, of course, I mean, you're not going to win that battle, because the Republicans are pushing out their fringe and they're talking about populist stuff, but you're talking about populist stuff and you still have the ideologies that nobody agrees with. No one who has any common sense. And that's the other thing too, is that when people finally saw, oh, we can put our foot down. Like, I think the Budlight thing was actually a monumental shift where the public saw, if we boycott something and we stand our ground, we can make a difference. And so seeing that is a turning point to them, where you can say, I'm sick and tired of Target's DEI stuff, we're not going to go in there. Like, I went in one and supposedly they un-DEI'd it, but even on some of their visuals on their boards and stuff, like their panels for like clothing, they have like, and I get it, right? Some amount of inclusivity is great because you want people to feel like they belong, but like they have a kid with arm braces, and it's like, who is this for? Like, what percentage of the population, like, yes, it happens and it's tragic, but like, what percentage of the population is this image for? Like, my child is 99.9% of children are, do not have sclerosis or whatever and need arm braces and, or whatever the ailment is, but that's not the average person. I can't see myself. I'm not buying my children those clothes because I don't see my child. That's not my child. Like, what are you doing? It's still woke. And that's the thing, is people can see these companies, or Cracker Barrel with the steep decline in the stock price in the last few days. Like, you just look at these things and you go, okay, I can actually make a difference, and I can vote with my dollars. And I think people realizing that has woken them up to this fact, this actuality, and so we don't have to put up with it anymore. And so when you see that you can do it to companies, well, guess what? I can do it to politicians too. And I think that's something that politicians really need to grapple with and understand.
Analysis. To me, it all seems systemic. Do you think that these trends are reversible? And where is the part of the party that needs to be running point on this? Because over at the DNC, the chair, Ken Martin, says this is a crisis. It's a five-alarm fire. Are they the ones who have to start to fix it? What does that look like?
No, first of all, yes, of course it's reversible. I mean, I think we've seen trends throughout history where movements can change people and the way they view them, and parties change in response to the kind of data that we're seeing, right? I mean, if you don't respond to it, that would be malpractice. But I don't think, and I think it can be done at the national level. They certainly have to focus on it. But this has to be done community by community. I think every member of Congress, every member of the state legislature who cares about this, they need to be working on organizing people. What I hear, Allie, at events that I go to, and I was at several yesterday, keep hearing the same thing. What can we do? And I remind people, look, there are a number of things you can do. You can volunteer. You can engage with civic groups and organizations. You can join your political party locally and go out and knock on doors. We've been, believe it or not, hosting like a summer camp over the last several weeks. People had agreed to 7 weeks, 2 hours every Saturday morning to learn how to engage people in political activity. We've been full.
No. What's going to happen is, and this is why I say the death spiral, right? Because when the people in the middle abandon your party, if they're staying in the Republican, well, then the people who are left over are the ones that are going to continue to vote for their electorate, right? The people that are going to represent them in Congress. And so when that happens, well, then you're going to continue to get more radical and radical and radical and radical candidates. However, there could be that could be something that plays out pretty well, that I think, now that I'm thinking about it, in that, I mean, just given the Zoran Mamdani example, right? So far left that now he's a socialist. But at that point, whether you agree with his policies or not, he believes that what he's doing will actually help the majority of people who live in New York, especially New York City, right? Those are kind of the things that he's talking about, where he's saying, oh yeah, we want government-ran grocery stores, we want to freeze rents, these are problems that are uniquely affecting New Yorkers in New York City. And so if any of those policies come through, well, then I think people will see, oh, the Democrats are doing good things for us. Forget that the rest of the Democrats all hate him and do not want him to get elected. But then that is how you could start swaying some people back, is even if you don't agree with the policy, well, then I feel better, especially the people in the middle, I feel better. I didn't think about this policy as something that was actually realistic, but look, it's happening, and so now we're going to go back to the left. So I think it is possible, right, when you've fringed so far that you go to socialism or whatever, however you want to label it. But when you finally engage with candidates who are populist and not just part of the machine, and then, okay, well, now we're going to actually try and help people, and then we can win people back. I think that's the only way that you're actually going to start swinging them back.
Every week. It's been astonishing, and we've even engaged in field trips where people are going out and knocking on doors and talking to neighbors, and they're loving it. But they're also showing up at volunteer activities, saying to people, what can we do to help community? So it has to be done literally at the block level. We're not going to re-engage with people by doing simply a national effort. Yes, I appreciate the party chair at the national level saying we have to do it. But this has to get done literally on every block, with every neighbor, with every civic group, with every volunteer group. We need to keep talking about people, not only...
No, it needs to get done with policies and talking points. What are the things that you're actually going to do to improve the lives of the people you serve? And if you don't have policies that are helping the average person, you're not going to win. None of this going out and knocking on doors or whatever he's talking about here. No one cares about that. That's not actually going to... That makes you and the people who participate feel good, but that's not actually helping your cause. Helping your cause is actually... What's going to help people who are going to vote for you is actually making difference in the average person's life.
About the threats that we face as Americans, but all the good things that Democrats believe in that will elevate the lives of average Americans.
You know, we've also seen Democrats, I think, change their tactics. We started the show talking about the way that Gavin Newsom is sort of setting a new tone for pushback in California. But New York is another one of those states that's responding to Texas's redistricting efforts with some pushes of their own from Kathy Hochul, the governor there. Can you talk about the latest that New Yorkers should expect to see on that front and that anyone who's watching this redistricting battle should look for?
So two things. Number one, on the Gavin Newsom providing pushback. Again, he's just trying to emulate Trump, and that's not actually what people want. What people want is a better life, and again, not these fringe ideologies that are going to come along with him. And to be quite frank, when the actual 2028 election is coming up, Gavin Newsom, I will call it now, he's going to be radioactive. No one can look at what's going on in California and the wildfires and the riots and the anti-immigration and this, that, and the other. No one is going to be able to look at that and say, yes, I want this for the entire nation. Plus, anytime I look at him, I'm pretty sure he's high on something because of how he dances around. It's real weird. I will say now, no, he is going to be radioactive to most of the country. But then number two, the point on the redistricting and all that, who cares? Here's the thing is that both parties do it. One trying to decry the other is just absolutely insane. So the whole nation should do it. And or take away all immigrants from the counting, or these are all just the dumbest arguments. None of them actually matter, because at the end of the day, if everyone else does it, well then guess what? Then Nebraska is going to redistrict, and then there's going to be no Democratic representation in all of the middle of the country at all, and it'll just go on and on and on and on, and whatever. So yeah, that's the thing about redistricting. It's just exhausting because it's not actually an argument because both sides do it. So I'm that's why I haven't covered it, is because it's just the dumbest argument.
Yeah, first of all, I'm so grateful to the governor, who's a longtime friend and has been really working incredibly hard at New York at rebuilding and elevating people and talking to people about the things they care about. Redistricting is certainly on the mind of New Yorkers. I mean, I really can't have a conversation in community anymore without people raising what's happened in Texas and what is being threatened in other places. So we're going to do whatever we can to push back. We have some limitations in New York. We do believe in independent redistricting, but we're also not going to fight with one hand tied behind our back.
Yeah, that's also the rationale that they're using in California, where they do also have independent redistricting commissions, and they're trying to override that in the short term.
The other thing to think about with all this redistricting stuff is that you can draw the new lines, but when there's such seismic shifts in one direction or the other, how do you know that your redistricting isn't going to get caught completely off guard? And especially as things get worse and worse and worse and worse, and new voters start coming of age, and then the old voters start dying off, the ones that are so entrenched. And then as these new ones are coming in, they're trying to figure out their identity, and they're swinging back. And in my opinion, they're going to be swinging back and forth as party after party disappoints them. So then, as you are redistricting these lines, who's to say that it's not going to actually backfire and it's not going to go the way that you think it is? So that's another consideration to take into this, and why I think I think the people that they're talking to are probably so politically involved that they think it's actually something that they should care about because that's what they're hearing about. But again, to me, it's a big nothing. Huge nothing burger. Doesn't actually matter. Who cares?
To change their maps now in reaction to Texas. The last thing I want to get you on, though, is President Trump's renewed quest to end mail-in voting. You're the ranking member of the House Admin Committee. You've got jurisdiction over federal election issues. What should people know when they hear Trump talk about this latest push here? What can he do? What can't he do?
Well, first of all, I feel like Dorothy, who hit her head and woke up in the land of Oz. I can't imagine what the president is talking about. Mail-in voting has been secure and safe and used in many states for decades without incident. There is no fraud. There's no recorded fraud. But the president often talks about things with certainty for which there is no evidence. he could convince people in the MAGA movement that UFOs routinely land in American cities and walk among us, and that he knows this for certain without any evidence. The truth is, mail-in ballots are secure. It would be virtually impossible to count 200 million American votes in an evening and give results on election night. The president is not a serious person. I think we know that. The people around him are not serious. These are 50 different elections, by the way. The presidential election is conducted by the states. It has always been an election by the 50 states, which is why we have the Electoral College. The president doesn't know what he's talking about, has no idea the need to do this. But we're going to have to continue to push back, because when you're taking election advice from Vladimir Putin, I think people in America ought to seriously question the sanity of the president.
And I do.
Here's the thing about that. I think that's kind of a crazy take. Is he actually going to do away with it? Who knows? I don't think it really matters all that much. I think the reason why it went so poorly for him with mail-in ballots in the 2020 election was because he was basically telling his base, don't do it. They're gonna cheat it, blah, blah, whatever. But the thing is, even with the mail-in ballots, I think logically it actually would benefit the base of the Republicans more, because if you think about it, you have to go in on a certain day and then vote in person. Well, if you are a college educated, you work in an office, you have a white collar job, it's going to be much easier for you to step away, go out and vote. And by the way, most of those employers encourage that kind of a thing. If you are a blue collar worker, well, Jim's not going to be able to step away from his construction job. No, we have something that we need to do, and okay, he might be able to, but there's going to be some subset of your voter base, when you're relying on more blue collar type people to go out and actually vote in person, is going to be much more challenging for them. And so actually, in my opinion, mail-in balloting, if you think logically about your voter base and their actions and their habits and all those types of things, mail-in voting would actually help the Republican Party in the long term. I think in the short term, when Trump was saying don't do it, go in, that kind of a thing. Or what if there's a snowstorm, right? If you live in the middle of, whatever state, and you have a giant snowstorm that blows in on election day, well, that's going to suppress your voter turnout. But if you are able to do mail-in, there's just these things where, I just think people don't think it through all the way. And literally, the logical conclusion of mail-in balloting is it will actually help the Republicans as long as blue-collar workers continue to break for them. It'll actually help them, I think, in the long term, especially if Trump says, yes, go out, do your mail-in voting, that kind of a thing. It's just such a stupid argument, in my opinion, but whatever. All right, and then since they didn't present this map, just because of how stark I thought this was to actually visualize it. So if you look at this map, you can see the top is of Democratic voter registration, and then the bottom was Republican voter registration. So if you look at this, okay, yes, you can see huge swings up in a few. You can see down in a few as well for Republicans, right? But then you see an equal amount, state by state, right? Okay, Oregon, it went down. Well, Democrats went down further in Oregon. Nevada, it went down for Republicans. It went down massively for Democrats in Nevada. So literally every single state, even the ones where Republicans lost, right? You can see it went down a little bit or a lot in Colorado or whatever. Democrats did worse in every single one of the 30 states. And that's what I'm saying. That's how you end up with an election where the Republicans win the popular vote and obviously the Electoral College. And all the swing states and, whatever. So this is the picture that it paints. And I think people don't quite understand that, just how bad the Democratic messaging, not having a primary, all these things did and how bad Americans have had it the last 4 years. And again, this could reverse. I fully expect this could reverse completely because, again, if people aren't feeling good under the Trump administration and what's going on with them, and if prices don't come down, and if we continue to be in wars constantly, and this, that, and the other, well then yes, 100%, it could swing back the other way very easily. But this just kind of proves that point that you have these fringe policies, everyone, no one's doing good. It's all bad. And so wanted to share this map because I thought it was very interesting. It paints a very stark picture. I mean, you can take a look at it and see just how badly it has gone for the Democrats. How much, there is literally, look at the top map, there is not a single arrow pointing up. Every single one of them is pointing down or down massively. And so just something to think about, something interesting. That's why I wanted to cover it. Mostly because of this map, but getting to talk about what I think are some of the deeper reasons why the Democratic Party is not going particularly well, not having a particularly good time right now. But that will about do it for today. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you find my content interesting, please subscribe. It really does help the channel. And if you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.